Kenya's Defense Cabinet Secretary just issued a stark warning that has every African watching. As US-Iran-Israel tensions explode into potential regional war, Kenya is on high alert, and what happens next could reshape Africa's entire security landscape. Welcome back to the channel where we break down African politics without the Western media filter. I am your host, and today we're diving deep into why Kenya's Defence Secretary Soipan Tuya's recent statement about Middle East tensions isn't just diplomatic talk, it's a red flag for the entire continent. We'll explore how these seemingly distant conflicts directly threaten African stability, Kenya's unique vulnerabilities, and what this means for Pan-African security. Like this video help more Africans see this story. Let's start with the context most international media want to give you. Kenya's concern about Middle East conflicts isn't new or random, it's rooted in decades of painful experience. Since the 1998 U.S. embassy bombing in Nairobi that killed 213 people, Kenya has been acutely aware of how global geopolitical tensions manifest on African soil. This wasn't just terrorism, it was Kenya paying the price for being America's ally in a region where such alliances carry deadly consequences. The Horn of Africa, where Kenya sits strategically, has always been a chessboard for global powers. During the Cold War, Somalia's civil war, Ethiopia's various conflicts, and Sudan's divisions all had external fingerprints, and Kenya absorbed the refugees, the economic disruption, and the security threats. Today, as US-Iran-Israel tensions aren't happening in a vacuum, they read the latest chapter in a story where African nations consistently bear the collateral damage of conflicts they didn't start. Now, Defense Secretary Tuya's warning comes as Iran and Israel edge closer to direct confrontation, with the US deeply involved. But here's what the mainstream media misses. Kenya's concern isn't just about potential terrorism. It's about economic warfare, supply chain disruptions, and the domino effect that Middle East instability creates across Africa. When oil prices spike due to Middle East tensions, African nations like Kenya already struggling with debt and inflation, feel it immediately at the pump, in food prices, and in their ability to import essential goods. Subscribe for honest, Pan-African analysis you want to find on CNN or BBC. Kenya's strategic position makes it particularly vulnerable. The port of Mombasa handles not just Kenya's trade but serves landlocked neighbors like Uganda, Rwanda, and Eastern DRC. Any disruption to global shipping, which Middle East conflicts routinely cause, hits Kenya's economy hard. Remember the ever-given blocking the Suez Canal? That was just an accident, but it cost Kenya millions daily. Now imagine deliberate attacks on shipping lanes during an Iran-Israel war. The players in this crisis extend far beyond the obvious ones. Yes, we have the United States, Iran, and Israel as primary actors, but Kenya's concern reflects a broader African reality. The continent is increasingly caught between competing global powers. China's Belt and Road Initiative has made Kenya a key partner, with the standard gauge railway being a flagship project. But Kenya also hosts significant US military presence and intelligence cooperation. When global tensions rise, Kenya finds itself in an impossible position, maintaining relationships with powers that may be on opposite sides of a conflict. Defense Secretary Tuya represents this delicate balancing act. Her background as a lawyer and diplomat reflects Kenya's approach, trying to navigate international law and multilateral institutions while protecting national interests. But she is also dealing with domestic pressures. Kenya's Muslim coastal communities have historical grievances about marginalization, and any perception that Kenya is too aligned with Israel or the US during a Middle East conflict could fuel internal tensions. The African Union's position adds another layer of complexity. While the AU officially supports Palestinian statehood and has criticized Israeli policies, individual member states like Kenya maintain pragmatic relationships with Israel, particularly in technology and security cooperation. When Secretary Tuya speaks about vigilance, she is acknowledging that Kenya can't simply follow continental consensus, it must protect its specific interests while managing relationships with all parties. Different perspectives within Kenya reflect this complexity. The government's official stance emphasizes neutrality and diplomatic engagement, but opposition voices question whether Kenya's alignment with Western powers makes it a target. Religious leaders, particularly from Muslim communities, have historically been more critical of Israeli policies, while Christian leaders and business communities often emphasize economic partnerships and security cooperation. These aren't just political differences, they represent genuine disagreements about Kenya's place in global affairs. International observers see Kenya as a bellwether for African responses to Middle East tensions. If Kenya, with its relatively stable democracy and diversified economy, is concerned enough to issue public warnings, it signals broader continental vulnerabilities. Security analysts point to Kenya's experience with al-Shabaab infiltration from Somalia as evidence that the country understands how regional conflicts metastasize across borders. For the broader African context, Kenya's alert status highlights a critical challenge: the continent's ongoing struggle with external shocks. Whether it's commodity price volatility, supply chain disruptions, or proxy conflicts, African nations consistently find themselves managing crises they didn't create. Secretary Tuya's statement isn't just about current US-Iran-Israel tensions, it's about a pattern where African stability depends on conflicts resolved thousands of miles away. This connects to larger questions about African agency in global affairs. Kenya's vigilance is partly defensive, preparing for potential negative spillovers. But it also reflects limited ability to influence the primary conflicts that affect African interest. Unlike European or Asian powers that can meaningfully impact Middle East dynamics, African nations often find themselves as spectators to conflicts that will determine their economic and security futures. This is the neo-colonial reality many African leaders refuse to acknowledge publicly. Economically, the implications extend beyond immediate security concerns. Kenya's tourism industry, crucial for foreign currency, could suffer if regional instability affects international travel patterns. The country's growing tech sector, which has attracted Israeli investment and partnerships, could face disruptions. Most critically, Kenya's debt situation, already challenging with Chinese loans and international bondholders, could worsen if global economic conditions deteriorate due to Middle East conflicts. Subscribe and hit the bell for more African perspectives on global events that shape our continent's future. Looking ahead, Kenya's alert posture suggests a more proactive approach to global risk management. Rather than simply reacting to crises, the government appears to be building early warning systems and diplomatic buffers. This could become a model for other African nations, anticipating rather than just responding to external shocks. However, the effectiveness of such approaches depends on broader continental cooperation and the ability to present unified African positions on global conflicts. The stakes are enormous. If Middle East tensions escalate into broader conflict, Africa could face simultaneous challenges: refugee flows, economic disruption, increased terrorism risks, and pressure to choose sides in ways that divide the continent. Kenya's warning, delivered through Defence Secretary Tuya, is ultimately a call for African preparedness in an increasingly unstable global environment. What we are witnessing isn't just Kenya's response to current tensions, it is a preview of how African nations will need to navigate an era of great power competition where neutrality becomes increasingly difficult to maintain. The question isn't whether Kenya can avoid the impact of US-Iran-Israel conflict, it is whether African nations can develop the collective strength to manage such impact on their own terms. This story is still developing, and the implications will unfold over months and potentially years. But Secretary Tuya's frank acknowledgement of Kenya's vulnerability marks an important moment. African leaders are beginning to speak more honestly about their limited control over their nation's destinies in a multipolar world. Check out this next video where we explore how other African nations are preparing for global instability. The coming months will test whether Kenya's vigilance translates into effective protection for its citizens and interests. Comment your thoughts below. Do you think African nations can do more to influence global conflicts that affect them, or are we destined to remain reactive to external shocks? Let us keep this crucial conversation going.